Hello, this is Coach Wilson, and this is Unit 10, Day 2. Today I'd like for you to complete your journal. Obviously, if we were in class, it would be with a partner, but today I'd like for you to go find 5 issues from the 1800s that dealt with immigration, foreign policy, or the United States dealing with another country. You can look all the way back into the 1860s, all the way up through the 1900s, through World War I, but I'd like for you to just look through some foreign policy issues and some immigration issues that we've had over the last 50 to 70 years of history. Now, today we're going to be picking up the tensions in Europe. They're rising, and guess what? Things are not good. Our essential question for the day, what were some of the initial issues leading into World War II in Europe? Now, one of the first topics we're going to talk about is militarism. And militarism is using a strong military aggressively to promote national interest. Hitler and Germany are going to use militarism to push their policy. So will Japan. Japan's going to dominate over the country like we talked about in Day 1 when we talked about with Hideki Tojo and the invasion of Manchuria. The dominance of the armed forces in the administration of the state means they're going over the government's head. Okay, that's what militarism does. They control the government. And often there's a strong sense of nationalism. And remember we talked about with Germany, there was a huge sense of nationalism in their society. Now, the United States before World War II was a very different place than what it will be after World War II when we have completely changed we've industrialized even further. We've just completely changed after World War II. But prior to this, we were very discouraged. Okay, the United States was discouraged of the fact that dictators were rising in Europe with Mussolini, with Francisco Franco, with Hitler, and it just discouraged a lot of Americans. And they saw their efforts in World War I as vain, that basically we wasted our time sending people over there and that we had essentially been pushed into it by arms manufacturers who wanted to sell weapons during World War I. Because of this, it's going to push American citizens towards isolationism. And prior to World War I and after World War I, we were very much an isolated country. We tried to stay out of foreign affairs. Now, the Neutrality Act of 1935 will be passed, making it illegal for Americans to sell arms to any country at war. So essentially, we are taking our foothold out of the world, okay, and we are kind of reserving into ourselves, and we're going to say, hey, we're not getting involved. It's none of our business. Y'all do what you're doing, but leave us alone. So that brings us to isolationism. And isolationism is a foreign policy which combines a non-interventionist military policy and a political policy of economic nationalism. So essentially, we're worried about us. We're going to promote the United States. We're going to promote what's going on here. But while we're doing that, we're going to try to avoid any type of alliance with any other country. And we're going to try to put up barriers to decrease the amount of involvement we have with other countries. All right? Now, like what we talked about in our journal with immigration, that's going to be something else that is affected by this. Along with our isolationist policies are going to be a huge turn towards turning people away, immigration quotas, keeping these immigrants from coming into our country, whether it be Germans, eventually Japanese, who we were already excluding in some ways anyways, Chinese, there's all sorts of groups, Slavs, Greeks, etc. Now, in Europe, Germany is beginning to change. In 1938, Germany is threatening to invade Austria if Austrian Nazis were not put in government positions. That's not good. Hitler is beginning to kind of realize this dream that he wrote about in Mein Kampf. In 1938, Austria puts unification to a vote, and Hitler announces Anschluss, or unification of Austria. No one even opposed the annexation that had any merit. For the most part, Austria accepted the kind of annexation by Germany. They were okay with it, and they were perfectly fine in being involved with Germany and kind of pushing the same message. There was a lot of Germans already living in Austria. They felt like they already kind of had a connection anyways from the First World War. And many Austrians were thrilled at the thought of their country being Germany, being a part of Germany. It didn't represent all Austrians, of course, but it's hard to ignore that this German conquest obviously had a lot of support of those being conquested. Okay? Now, the Nuremberg laws are going to kind of move into the second part of Mein Kampf that's being realized. All right, Germany's in turmoil. And what happens here, or not Germany, Europe is in turmoil. Germany is conquering. And what happens here is the first laws restricting Jews were passed. And this is kind of moving into that time where we're talking about the Holocaust. In September of 1935, they took citizenship away from Jewish Germans and banned marriage between Jews and other Germans. In December of 1935, the Jews defined as having at least one Jewish grandparent. So if you had one Jewish grandparent, you were considered completely Jew. And Jews were not allowed to hold public office or vote any longer. They also had to change their names to something that sounded Jewish. Okay, that is a way that they could be recognized. So a lot of discrimination coming their way during this time. And it's only going to get worse. By 1936, Jews had lost their right to work as teachers, journalists, farmers, and actors. By 1938, they were banned from practicing law, medicine, or operating a business. They had no source of income. So, essentially, Jews in less than 3 years in Germany are being completely taken out of everything that they'd ever owned or operated with. Now, it's important to note that the reason that the Jews were hated by Hitler, okay, is like we talked about in day one, which is that they were the money handlers. Okay, they had a lot to do with finances, and they had helped the German military with some funding, but had remained passive during the war. They did not get involved. Hitler resented them for that. So when they get to World War II, Hitler is taking out some of his hatred towards them because he believes they were just as big a part as the German government of losing the war in World War I. Now, with that said, you're going to continue to see this discrimination for the Jews get worse and worse, and you're going to see it start to kind of bleed over into other countries who are going to begin to hold some hatred or some hostility towards Jewish people. Now, we come to Kristallnacht, which is known as the Night of Broken Glass, and it's the first organized attack against Jews in Germany. Germans killed Jews, destroyed businesses, synagogues, and Jews were forced to pay for the damages. Essentially, in 1938, November, a Jewish man had shot a German diplomat in Paris, and Hitler ordered his Ministry of Propaganda to stage attacks against Jews and tried to make it appear that it was some spontaneous popular reaction by German people over this murder. It comes to be known as the Night of Broken Glass, in which 90 Jews were killed, many more were injured, over 7,500 businesses destroyed, and over 180 synagogues were wrecked. This is a huge moment in Jewish history because going forward, you're going to start to see the yellow patches on their clothing where they had to be identified so that they could identify them as Jewish. You're going to start to see the mass murdering of Jewish people during the Holocaust. Now, there was obviously attempts by many Jewish people to try to flee between 1933 and 1939. Over 350,000 Jews escaped Germany, the likes of which included Albert Einstein. All right. High unemployment rates made immigrants very unpopular in the United States. So it wasn't like these immigrants had a lot of choices where to go. Even though they were trying to leave Germany, they were still forced into Europe. It's a bad situation. There's not many ways better to put it, but the fact that most countries already had immigration quotas, the United States included, and they were affected by this anti-Jewish propaganda of, the negativity towards Jewish people. But anywho, here's your vocabulary. Make sure you get both these words down. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll talk to you soon.